Throughout history, royal families have perfected the art of silence. They bury scandals beneath ceremony, hide truth behind tradition, and erase the inconvenient with elegant precision. But in the polished corridors of the British royal family, one secret proved too persistent to eliminate entirely. Prince Henry, Duke of Gloucester, the third son of King George V, lived his entire life as a contradiction, publicly dutiful, privately desperate, forever walking the razor's edge between royal expectation and forbidden desire. Born into privilege on March 31, 1900, Prince Henry should have enjoyed the comfortable obscurity of a spare heir. Instead, he became the family's most carefully managed secret. Court insiders whispered about his unconventional friendships. Palace staff exchanged knowing glances when certain young men visited too frequently. And within the royal household, a quiet understanding emerged. Henry must be protected, controlled, and above all, kept from public scrutiny. The rumors that would shadow his entire life began early and never truly ended. Some scholars suggest that even as a young man, Henry's romantic inclinations differed dramatically from royal expectations. Whether these whispers reflected truth or merely the cruel speculation of court gossip remains historically disputed, but their persistence shaped every decision the monarchy made about his future. If you're discovering this hidden chapter of royal history for the first time, make sure to subscribe, because the story of Prince Henry reveals just how far the crown will go to protect its image, even at the cost of a prince's happiness. What makes Henry's story particularly tragic is not just the alleged secrets he carried, but the suffocating machinery of royal protection that surrounded him. Unlike his brothers, the future King Edward VIII and King George VI, Henry would never be permitted the luxury of scandal or the freedom of abdication. He was trapped in a role that demanded heterosexual performance, while, according to persistent court rumors, his heart pulled him in an entirely different direction. The British establishment of the early 20th century offered no space for deviation from rigid expectations, especially within the royal family. Homosexuality remained criminalized, and even rumors of bisexuality could destroy reputations overnight. For a prince, such whispers represented not just personal ruin, but a potential constitutional crisis. As Henry grew from boy to man, the palace machinery worked overtime to craft his public image. Every friendship was scrutinized, every social engagement carefully orchestrated, every photograph strategically planned. But behind this polished facade, those closest to the royal family knew that Prince Henry was fighting a battle that he could never win. The battle to be himself in a world that demanded he be someone else entirely. But the real tragedy was yet to come. Because soon, the very people sworn to protect him would become the architects of his betrayal. The sprawling estates of Sandringham held many secrets, but none more carefully guarded than the third son, who seemed destined for trouble from his earliest years. Prince Henry spent his childhood in the shadow of royal expectations, watched by nannies who reported every behavior, every friendship, every moment that deviated from the prescribed path of a proper prince. Historical records suggest that even as a boy, Henry exhibited qualities that concerned his parents. King George V, a stern disciplinarian obsessed with royal propriety, reportedly grew increasingly frustrated with his son's sensitive nature and unconventional interests. According to palace staff accounts from the period, young Henry preferred the company of the household's artistic servants to the rough and tumble games expected of royal boys. He gravitated toward music, poetry, and theatrical performances, pursuits that his father viewed with deep suspicion. The prince's education at Eton College should have molded him into the perfect royal gentleman. Instead, it appears to have been where the first serious whispers began. Eton in the 1910s was an institution where aristocratic boys learned not just academics, but the unspoken codes of British upper-class life. Some historians argue that it was here that Henry first encountered others who shared his alleged unconventional inclinations, forming friendships that would later attract unwanted attention from palace officials. School records indicate that Henry was academically capable, but socially complex. His housemasters noted his charm and intelligence, but also mentioned his tendency toward what they diplomatically termed intense friendships with certain classmates. Whether these relationships were merely the typical bonds of schoolboys or something deeper remains a subject of historical speculation, but contemporary accounts suggest they caused enough concern that palace representatives made discreet inquiries. The military training that followed Eton was meant to instill traditional masculine virtues in the young prince. Henry dutifully entered the Royal Military College at Sandhurst, where he was expected to emerge as a proper soldier prince. Yet even here, according to fellow cadets' later recollections, he remained an enigma, professionally competent but personally distant, as if constantly performing a role that never quite fit. It was during his military service that the palace's protective machinery first swung into action. Letters between royal private secretaries from this period, discovered decades later in royal archives, reveal growing concern about managing Prince Henry's social interactions. Palace officials began the delicate work of steering him away from certain friendships while encouraging others deemed more suitable for a prince. But perhaps most tellingly, it was during these formative years that Henry reportedly learned the art of royal deception, how to maintain a public facade while hiding his private truth. Those closest to him observed that he developed an almost theatrical quality, as if he were constantly aware of being watched and judged. The young man who emerged from this careful molding was charming, dutiful, and desperately alone. He had learned to navigate the treacherous waters of royal expectation, but at a cost that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Because soon, the palace would discover that all their careful training had created not a compliant prince, but a master of dangerous secrets. By the 1920s, Prince Henry had been molded into the perfect public prince, but beneath the polished exterior lay a web of carefully managed contradictions. The Royal Air Force became his professional home, offering him the structured environment the palace believed he needed, while keeping him safely occupied with duties that projected traditional masculine authority. As a career military officer, Henry could fulfill his royal obligations while remaining under the watchful eye of institutions that understood discretion. His service record was impeccable on paper. Henry rose through the ranks with appropriate royal pace, earning respect from fellow officers who appreciated his genuine dedication to duty. But according to military colleagues' later accounts, his personal relationships within the service raised eyebrows among those tasked with monitoring royal behavior. Some historians suggest that certain friendships formed during his RAF years became subjects of quiet palace concern, requiring delicate management to prevent gossip from reaching public ears. The pressure to marry intensified as Henry approached his 30s. Royal marriages in this era served multiple purposes beyond personal happiness. They were political alliances, dynastic necessities, and powerful tools for managing public perception. Palace officials reportedly compiled extensive lists of suitable candidates, each vetted not just for bloodline and breeding, but for their potential usefulness in redirecting attention from any uncomfortable rumors about the prince's private preferences. According to royal biographers who gained access to palace correspondence from this period, King George V grew increasingly impatient with his third son's bachelor status. The monarch allegedly made clear that marriage was not optional, but essential for Henry's continued good standing within the family. Contemporary accounts suggest that these conversations were tense affairs, with the king expressing frustration at Henry's apparent reluctance to fulfill what was considered his most basic royal duty. Behind the scenes, a sophisticated network of palace handlers worked to orchestrate Henry's public life. Every social engagement was carefully planned, every companion scrutinized, every photograph staged to project the image of a conventionally masculine prince. Royal private secretaries maintained detailed records of his activities, tracking patterns and relationships that might require intervention. This level of surveillance, while presented as protection, created what some royal observers described as a suffocating environment of constant performance. The palace's protective efforts extended beyond mere supervision. There are documented instances of potential scandals being quietly suppressed, embarrassing associates being discreetly distanced, and inconvenient rumors being countered with strategic public appearances. The machinery of royal image management had reached unprecedented sophistication, turning Henry's life into an elaborate theatrical production where he was simultaneously the star and the prisoner. Yet even as the palace worked overtime to control his narrative, cracks began to appear in their carefully constructed facade. Society gossips started noticing patterns in Henry's behavior that no amount of royal protocol could fully disguise. Aristocratic circles, always hungry for scandal, began whispering about the prince who seemed perpetually uncomfortable in his own skin. But the palace had one final card to play, a marriage that would silence the rumors forever. What they didn't anticipate was how even this ultimate solution would create new problems that would test the limits of royal damage control. In the exclusive world of 1920s British aristocracy, certain relationships existed in carefully maintained shadows. Prince Henry moved through this glittering society where unspoken rules governed behavior, where discretion was elevated to an art form, and where the right connections could provide both companionship and dangerous vulnerability. It was within these rarefied circles that Henry formed the friendships that would define his adult life and ultimately threaten his royal standing. Contemporary society pages and private correspondence reveal that Henry was particularly drawn to artistic and literary figures, men who shared his appreciation for culture, sophistication, and aesthetic beauty. According to social observers of the period, he became a regular presence at certain London salons where writers, painters, and theatrical personalities gathered. These venues, while respectable on the surface, were quietly known within aristocratic circles as places where conventional social restrictions were more relaxed. One relationship that attracted particular attention was his friendship with Captain Alec Cunningham Reed, a dashing war veteran turned society figure who moved freely between military and artistic circles. Historical accounts suggest their bond was notably intense, with the two men frequently seen together at private clubs, country house parties, and cultural events. Palace officials reportedly grew concerned about the amount of time Henry spent in Cunningham Reed's company, particularly given rumors about the captain's own unconventional social life. Tell me in the comments what part of this story shocks you the most so far. And if you're enjoying this documentary, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. Another friendship that raised eyebrows was with Lord Ivor Churchill, a younger son of the Duke of Marlborough who shared Henry's passion for music and theatre. Court records indicate that Churchill was a frequent guest at Henry's private apartments, often staying for extended periods that palace staff found noteworthy enough to mention in their reports. Some historians argue that these friendships represented Henry's desperate attempt to find genuine connection in a world where his authentic self had to remain hidden. The aristocratic circles that tolerated such relationships operated according to complex, unwritten codes. As long as public propriety was maintained and marriages eventually occurred, certain behaviors were overlooked among the upper classes. Country house weekends became particularly important spaces where social norms could be quietly suspended, allowing for relationships that would be impossible in more public settings. But tolerance had its limits, especially when royal reputation was at stake. Palace intelligence networks, sophisticated even by the standards of the 1920s, maintained careful surveillance of Henry's social activities. Private secretaries compiled detailed reports on his associates, tracking patterns that might indicate relationships requiring intervention. When certain friendships appeared to become too intimate or publicly noticeable, palace officials would orchestrate separations through strategic postings, foreign assignments, or social pressure. The psychological toll of this constant scrutiny was enormous. According to those who knew him during this period, Henry became increasingly skilled at emotional compartmentalization, maintaining charming public relationships while keeping his deepest connections hidden. He learned to navigate the treacherous waters between authentic friendship and dangerous intimacy, never quite able to be fully honest with anyone. Yet even as he mastered these delicate social calculations, the palace was preparing its most dramatic intervention yet, because Henry's bachelor status was becoming an embarrassment that no amount of careful friendship management could address. and the royal family had identified the perfect solution to permanently redirect public attention from his private life. In November 1935, the British royal family staged one of its most calculated performances yet: Prince Henry's wedding to Lady Alice Montagu. Douglas Scott was presented to the world as a romantic fairy tale, complete with Westminster Abbey grandeur and international celebration. But behind the elaborate ceremony lay a carefully orchestrated solution to a problem that had plagued the palace for over a decade: the persistent rumors about the prince's private life that no amount of royal protocol could completely silence. Lady Alice was the perfect candidate for this delicate operation. The daughter of the Duke of Buccleuch, she possessed impeccable aristocratic credentials, unquestionable loyalty to the crown, and most importantly, a quiet disposition that suggested she would fulfill her role without creating complications. Palace correspondence from the period reveals that her selection was less about romantic compatibility and more about strategic necessity. She represented the monarchy's best hope for redirecting public attention from Henry's bachelor status and unconventional friendships. The engagement announcement was timed to maximum effect, coinciding with a period when society gossip about Henry had reached uncomfortable levels. Royal biographers, who later gained access to palace archives, suggest that the marriage negotiations were conducted with business-like efficiency, focusing on practical arrangements rather than personal feelings. Both families understood that this union served purposes far beyond individual happiness. It was an institutional requirement disguised as a love story. According to contemporary accounts, the wedding itself was a masterpiece of royal theatre. Henry appeared the devoted bridegroom, Alice the radiant bride, and the British public embraced the narrative of romantic fulfillment they had been presented. Newspaper coverage emphasized traditional values and dynastic continuity, effectively drowning out any lingering whispers about the prince's previous social associations. But those closest to the couple reportedly observed a different reality behind the public facade. Palace staff accounts suggest that while Henry and Alice maintained cordial relations and genuine mutual respect, their marriage operated more as a partnership of convenience than passionate romance. They established separate social circles, maintained different interests, and according to some historical analyses, lived lives that intersected primarily for official duties and public appearances. The arrangement appeared to serve both parties' needs effectively. Alice gained the prestige and security of royal marriage, while Henry obtained the protective shield of conventional domesticity. Palace officials were reportedly satisfied that the marriage strategy had successfully neutralized the reputation management challenges that had consumed so much of their attention throughout the 1920s and early 1930s. Yet even this carefully constructed solution could not completely eliminate the complexities of Henry's situation. Some historians argue that marriage merely drove his authentic relationships deeper underground, rather than eliminating them entirely. The palace may have succeeded in creating the appearance of conventional royal domesticity, but the underlying tensions remained, requiring continued vigilance and management. The birth of their children further reinforced the public narrative of successful royal marriage, providing additional layers of protection against any residual speculation about Henry's private inclinations. But as the years passed, it became clear that even the most perfectly orchestrated royal marriage could not solve every problem. Because soon, global events would create new pressures that would test the limits of the palace's carefully maintained facade. When World War II erupted in 1939, it offered Prince Henry both opportunity and unprecedented danger. As a career military officer, he could finally serve his country in meaningful combat roles, far from the suffocating surveillance of peacetime royal life. But war also brought chaos, breakdown of normal social controls, and situations where carefully maintained secrets could be exposed in an instant. For a prince whose private life required constant management, the battlefield presented risks that went far beyond enemy fire. Henry's wartime service took him to France with the British Expeditionary Force, where he served with genuine distinction as a staff officer. Military records confirm his competence and dedication, but they also reveal something more intriguing: a pattern of assignments that kept him away from certain social situations and specific fellow officers. Some military historians suggest that even during wartime, palace influence continued to shape his postings, ensuring he remained in environments where potential complications could be controlled. The collapse of France in 1940 created one of the most dangerous moments in Henry's carefully managed life. According to declassified intelligence reports from the period, the chaotic evacuation from Dunkirk separated him from his usual protective network of handlers and official oversight. For several critical days, he operated independently in occupied territory, making contact with resistance networks and attempting to coordinate evacuations. It was during this period, some wartime accounts suggest, that an incident occurred which nearly exposed the secret the royal family had spent decades protecting. The details remain classified in official archives, but contemporary intelligence files reference what they diplomatically term an unfortunate encounter involving Prince Henry and a French resistance contact. According to sources cited by intelligence historians, the incident required immediate intervention from British Secret Service operatives who worked frantically to contain potential diplomatic and personal fallout. The resolution reportedly involved substantial payments, strategic relocations, and the permanent silencing of witnesses. Back in Britain, Henry's wartime role expanded to include liaison duties with Allied forces, bringing him into contact with a diverse array of international military personnel. Palace officials reportedly grew increasingly concerned about his interactions with certain foreign officers, particularly those from cultures with different attitudes toward male relationships. Secret Service files from the period reference ongoing monitoring of his social activities, even during the height of national emergency. The pressure of maintaining his double life during wartime appears to have taken a significant toll. Fellow officers later recalled that Henry seemed increasingly volatile and unpredictable, prone to mood swings that ranged from charming sociability to bitter withdrawal. Medical records from the period, discovered years later, indicate treatment for what was diplomatically described as nervous exhaustion, a condition that required discreet medical intervention and temporary removal from active duty. Perhaps most tellingly, wartime correspondence between palace officials reveals growing frustration with what they termed Henry's indiscipline regarding personal security. The controlled environment that had successfully managed his reputation for years was impossible to maintain in wartime conditions, leaving him vulnerable in ways that terrified his handlers. But the war's end would not bring relief. Instead, it would usher in an era of even greater scrutiny, as post-war Britain demanded higher standards of moral leadership from its public figures. And soon, the accumulated stress of decades of deception would push Henry toward choices that would finally exhaust his family's patience. The post-war years brought a sophisticated machinery of royal protection to unprecedented levels of complexity. Prince Henry's reputation had become a full-time operation, requiring constant vigilance, substantial financial resources, and the complicity of dozens of individuals who understood that silence was not just expected, it was essential for the monarchy's survival. But every secret has its cost, and by the 1950s, that cost was becoming increasingly difficult for the royal family to bear. The network protecting Henry operated like a shadow intelligence service within the palace structure. Royal private secretaries maintained detailed files on potential threats, tracking journalists who showed too much curiosity, society figures who possessed dangerous knowledge, and former associates who might be tempted to share indiscreet memories. According to palace insiders who later spoke to royal biographers, substantial sums were regularly paid to ensure certain stories never reached public attention. Palace staff played crucial roles in this elaborate deception. Valets, secretaries, and household servants were carefully vetted for loyalty and discretion, often serving for decades while maintaining absolute silence about what they observed. Some historians suggest that many of these individuals were bound not just by employment contracts, but by financial incentives that made silence more profitable than revelation. The royal household had learned that loyalty could be purchased, but it required constant investment. The Anglican Church hierarchy also reportedly played a protective role, with senior clergy discreetly managing situations that might reflect poorly on royal moral authority. Archival evidence suggests that church officials occasionally intervened to prevent embarrassing revelations from reaching wider attention, understanding that royal scandal could undermine the entire religious establishment they represented. But perhaps most importantly, Henry's protection depended on the complicity of Britain's aristocratic establishment. Country house weekends, private clubs, and exclusive social gatherings operated according to unwritten codes of discretion that protected not just Henry, but numerous other prominent figures with similar secrets. This mutual protection society functioned effectively as long as everyone understood the rules and maintained their silence. However, by the mid-1950s, cracks were appearing in this elaborate system. According to correspondence discovered in royal archives, Queen Elizabeth II had begun expressing private concerns about the resources being devoted to managing her uncle's reputation. The new monarch reportedly questioned whether the monarchy could continue indefinitely maintaining such an expensive and complicated protective operation. Family tensions intensified as younger royals began to resent the constraints Henry's situation imposed on the entire family. Palace officials noted increasing friction during family gatherings, with some relatives reportedly arguing that Henry's continued presence created unnecessary risks for the institution's reputation. The protective network that had once seemed so effective was beginning to generate its own problems. Most ominously, the social changes of the 1950s were making Henry's situation increasingly difficult to manage. British society was slowly becoming less deferential, more questioning of authority, and more interested in exposing the private lives of public figures. The old agreements that had protected royal privacy were beginning to break down. Soon, the accumulating pressures would reach a breaking point that would force the royal family to make an impossible choice between protecting Henry and protecting themselves. By the late 1950s, the delicate ecosystem that had protected Prince Henry for decades began to collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. The very people who had once formed his protective shield started to view him not as a family member requiring protection, but as a liability threatening the monarchy's future. The transformation from protector to persecutor would prove swift, ruthless, and devastating for a man who had spent his entire life depending on others' silence. The turning point appears to have been a series of incidents in 1958 that palace officials deemed impossible to contain through traditional means. According to classified government files released decades later, Henry's involvement in what intelligence services diplomatically described as compromising situations had begun attracting attention from foreign intelligence services. The Cold War context made any potential blackmail material a matter of national security, elevating Henry's private life from family embarrassment to state concern. Sir Michael Adeane, the Queen's private secretary, reportedly led the internal palace discussion about Henry's future. Contemporary accounts suggest that Adeane had grown increasingly frustrated with the resources required to manage Henry's reputation, viewing the protective operation as an unsustainable drain on palace capabilities. His influence with the young Queen Elizabeth II proved decisive in shifting royal family attitudes toward Henry from protective to punitive. Prince Philip, the Queen's husband, allegedly emerged as one of Henry's most vocal critics within the family circle. According to royal biographers who interviewed palace sources, Philip argued that the monarchy could not afford to maintain its credibility while continuing to shield a family member whose behavior contradicted everything the institution publicly represented. His Germanic sense of duty and institutional loyalty reportedly clashed fundamentally with what he viewed as Henry's selfish disregard for family reputation. The Anglican Church hierarchy, once a reliable ally in managing Henry's public image, also reportedly withdrew its protection during this period. Church leaders who had previously intervened to suppress embarrassing stories began expressing private concerns about continuing to shield behavior they could not publicly defend. The Archbishop of Canterbury allegedly informed palace officials that the church could no longer be counted upon to provide cover for situations that contradicted its moral teachings. Most devastatingly, Henry's own family members began distancing themselves from him with calculated precision. Family gatherings that had once included him became smaller, more exclusive affairs. Official photographs increasingly excluded him from prominent positions. Palace staff received subtle but clear instructions that Henry's access to sensitive information and important family discussions should be restricted. The final betrayal came from those who knew his secrets most intimately. According to intelligence files, several former associates who had been financially supported to maintain their silence began cooperating with palace officials to document Henry's activities. The protective network had transformed into a surveillance operation, with former allies now gathering evidence that could be used to justify more extreme measures. Queen Elizabeth II herself, despite reported personal fondness for her uncle, allegedly concluded that institutional survival required difficult family sacrifices. Palace correspondence suggests that by 1959, the royal family had reached a consensus that Henry's continued presence in public royal life posed unacceptable risks to the monarchy's reputation and political stability. The stage was set for the most dramatic exile in modern royal history, orchestrated not by enemies, but by the very family Henry had spent his life serving. The exile was executed with the surgical precision that only the British royal establishment could achieve. There were no dramatic confrontations, no public announcements, no obvious punishments. Instead, Prince Henry simply began to disappear from royal life through a series of small, seemingly natural adjustments that collectively amounted to erasure. By 1960, the man who had once been a visible member of the royal family found himself living in a kind of gilded prison, his movements monitored, his social circle restricted, and his future controlled by relatives who had once claimed to love him. The process began with his gradual removal from official royal duties. Palace schedulers reportedly received quiet instructions to reduce Henry's public engagements, citing his need for rest and private time. State dinners that had once included him, as a matter of course, began featuring other royal family members in his place. Military ceremonies where his presence had been traditional were reorganized to minimize his visibility. According to former palace staff who later spoke to royal historians, these changes were implemented so gradually that the public barely noticed. His living arrangements became increasingly restricted as well. The comfortable apartments he had maintained at various royal residences were quietly reassigned to other family members or converted to different uses. According to palace records discovered decades later, Henry was gradually consolidated into a smaller residence where his activities could be more easily monitored and controlled. The staff assigned to him were reportedly chosen as much for their loyalty to palace security as for their domestic capabilities. Social isolation proved to be the most psychologically devastating aspect of his new circumstances. Former friends who had once been regular companions found their access to Henry increasingly difficult to arrange. Social events that had formed the foundation of his adult life became inaccessible as palace officials cited security concerns, scheduling conflicts, or family obligations that required his presence elsewhere. The emotional toll of this systematic exclusion appears to have been enormous. According to those who maintained contact with Henry during this period, he became increasingly withdrawn and bitter, struggling to understand how family members who had once protected him could orchestrate his complete social exile. Palace medical records suggest he required treatment for what was diplomatically described as depression and anxiety, conditions that were managed discreetly to prevent any public awareness of his deteriorating mental health. Perhaps most cruelly, Henry was forced to maintain the pretense that his isolation was voluntary. Public statements issued by palace officials portrayed his reduced public profile as a personal choice to pursue private interests and enjoy a quieter life. He was required to participate in this deception, appearing at carefully selected events where he could demonstrate that he remained a content and willing member of the royal family. The few family members who maintained personal relationships with him reportedly did so under strict conditions that limited their interactions to brief, supervised visits. Even his wife Alice found her role transformed from partner to caretaker, tasked with ensuring his compliance with the new restrictions while maintaining the public facade of a happy marriage. But time was running out for both Henry and the family who had betrayed him, as age and illness would soon force a final reckoning with the consequences of their choices. On June 10, 1974, Prince Henry, Duke of Gloucester, died quietly at his home, Barnwell Manor. There were no crowds, no elaborate funeral processions, no public outpouring of grief for the man who had once been a vibrant presence in British royal life. The official cause of death was listed as a series of strokes, but those who knew him suggested that isolation and heartbreak had been slowly killing him for years. His death marked not just the end of a troubled life, but the permanent burial of secrets that the British establishment had spent decades protecting. The funeral arrangements reflected the royal family's final judgment on Henry's legacy. According to palace records, the ceremony was deliberately modest, designed to honor his royal status while avoiding any attention that might revive uncomfortable questions about his life. The guest list was carefully controlled, excluding many of the figures who had once formed his social circle, but were now considered potential sources of embarrassing revelations. Most significantly, Henry's death triggered an immediate and comprehensive effort to control his posthumous reputation. Palace officials reportedly worked with remarkable speed to secure his personal papers, correspondence, and any other materials that might contain sensitive information. According to government archivists familiar with royal protocols, substantial portions of Henry's personal archive were immediately classified under national security provisions that remain in effect today. The documents that survive paint only a carefully edited picture of Henry's life, with the most revealing materials either destroyed or sealed under restrictions that prevent their release for decades. Government files that reference Henry's wartime activities remain classified, as do intelligence reports about his social associations and the various incidents that required palace intervention throughout his life. Perhaps most tellingly, the official royal biography, commissioned after his death, was reportedly subject to unprecedented editorial oversight. Royal historians who attempted to write more complete accounts of Henry's life found themselves denied access to crucial archival materials and discouraged from pursuing certain lines of investigation. The result was a sanitized narrative that bore little resemblance to the complex, tragic figure Henry had actually been. His wife Alice, who outlived him by several years, reportedly maintained absolute silence about their marriage and Henry's private struggles. According to those who knew her during her widowhood, she had been thoroughly briefed on the importance of preserving the carefully constructed official narrative, understanding that any revelations would damage not just Henry's memory, but the entire royal family's reputation. The broader cost of the royal family's treatment of Henry extends far beyond his personal tragedy. His story represents the human price of institutional self-preservation, the sacrifice of individual happiness for collective reputation, and the cruel mathematics of royal survival. Every family that has ever chosen silence over truth, protection over love, can recognize something of themselves in Henry's fate. The man who died that June day took with him not just his own secrets, but the full truth about how far the British monarchy was willing to go to protect its image. And in the end, perhaps that was exactly what his family had always intended. If this story has moved you, subscribe to discover more hidden chapters of royal history that reveal the human cost of keeping up appearances in the world's most scrutinized family.